Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the W4K What We Wish We Knew podcast, the podcast that talks about what we wish we knew when we were younger and what we wish we could know now that we are older. I'm your host, John Skye, and today we're talking about fighting in the Oval Office. Stay tuned to find out why. We're going there now. Okay, so first and foremost, I think it's important for us to understand why is this a topic of this podcast? Well, there are things that the media puts out there that we see a quick headline, a 5-second video clip, and we get confused or we get misled to have the media agenda brainwash us into thinking certain things. And it's important that we try to understand that there's always going to be a lot of noise with any broadcast environment. And I'm not talking about background noise. I'm talking about the noise through the actual message, through the real problems, the real issues, and the real truths that are out there. So today, President Trump, J.D. Vance, some other White House officials, the media, and President Zelenskyy from Ukraine, they all met in the Oval Office, and they did end up having a heated discussion. And I would argue that it actually wasn't that heated. The media is going to make it seem a lot more heated than it was. But if you go back and watch, Trump was actually very cool, calm, and collected. J.D. Vance was not really raising his voice. Everyone was pretty calm. They might have been passionate about what they were discussing. But I want to bring up some points of things that I observed while I was watching it. So first and foremost, what was the meeting about? What were they supposed to be there for? Well, they were supposed to have basically this was a press meeting where we could see in real time live how the president discusses things with, foreign leaders. And they were supposed to be discussing a deal that was supposed to be signed today, or at least the terms were supposed to be completely hashed out. And that was for the United States to secure mineral rights in the country of Ukraine in exchange for de facto protection from the United States. So when I say de facto, in this term, I'm saying we're not actually going to send troops, but we will provide financial assistance. We can provide weaponry. We can provide the things that are needed to make this deal work. However, there was a few things that went wrong in this meeting, and I'm going to talk about both sides of it. Normally, I haven't had an issue with J.D. Vance, with his commentary. I do think that when he was trying to make President Zelenskyy appear ungrateful, that probably didn't help the negotiations. However, I also want to say I don't think he was that far off or that wrong about the president. Now, Trump has been criticized. I'm not a huge Trump proponent, but, I think this term he's doing better than he did his first term, where he was basically a laughingstock. And you might not agree with his policies this term, but I think he's dealt with things in a much more professional way than he ever did previously. So when you end up having J.D. Vance interject saying, hey, you've not even said thank you to the United States, that's not really helping. But at the same time, in this topic where they were discussing the war going on between Russia and Ukraine, excuse me, I think it's important to understand that President Zelenskyy was extremely disrespectful throughout the his entire time here in the United States on this most recent visit. Okay, so he was supposed to have a meeting with the head of the United States Treasury Department, and they were going to be discussing the terms of the trade agreement for minerals, and he showed up 15 minutes late. Now, had Trump done that, the media would be all over it, saying, how disrespectful can our president be? Had Biden done that, they probably would have said the same thing. But the media doesn't seem to even hardly touch on the point that he arrived late, except for maybe a conservative outlet that some people might choose not to watch because they sometimes are a bit far right. We're not going to call out anyone specifically right now, but you know who it is. That, number one, possibly could be forgiven. He alleged that he accidentally slept through his alarm, and so he was late. Okay, it can happen. But then if you know you're going to be invited by the president of the free world, you don't even have to like Trump, but at least respect the office. If you're going to be invited by the president of the free world to the Oval Office, and you are going to have a meeting with him, with his assistants, his cabinet members, his vice president, whomever he invited, and you know it's going to be on the news, why do you show up in what looks like a tracksuit? You couldn't even put on a sports jacket? How disrespectful is that? Okay? So that's number one. He doesn't even, dress to respect the United States. Secondly, Trump was not trying to take sides with Russia. And if you go back and you look at the conversation that he had before everything got heated, and even when things did start to get heated, you will see that the conversation that he was trying to have was to explain to President Zelenskyy that he is not in a position to be able to negotiate the way that he wants. He simply does not have the power. He does not have the cards. Basically, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Okay? Or don't bite the hand. For those of you who don't know what that means, don't bite the hand that feeds you. And the United States has been feeding Ukraine far more than any other country in the world. In fact, we provided far more financial assistance during this time of war than the entire continent of Europe did, or at least of the European Union, which I think is absolutely ridiculous because it is like Trump says or has said in the past, we have an ocean between us and them. We don't even have real serious reason to have to go to bat for Ukraine, yet we do it. And you know why we do it? Because we know we are the most powerful nation in the world. We know that we are the leaders of the free world. And the rest of the world knows it. And whether or not the people who live in those countries want to agree with that is largely irrelevant. You can have your opinions, but it doesn't change the fact that the United States is the powerhouse of the world. And there are a few countries who even come close to meeting us in GDP, in military power, in responsibilities for other nations. We are the only one out there who even can stand at the podium for those types of things. So, what was Trump trying to say that Zelenskyy didn't agree on? Well, it's really hard to know if you go back and listen, because Zelenskyy was trying to say, hey, we've tried to have peace talks before with Russia and it doesn't work. So to me, what that says is he is basically saying, I'm not going to negotiate peace. We are done with peace. Zelenskyy wants war. And why does he want war? Well, that's a question that we'll have to ask him and find out in the future. But based on the conversation he had in that very brief scuffle in the Oval Office, he has felt that the United States has failed with peace negotiations to actually secure peace. And he's not wrong. But if you go back and you look at the people who did those negotiations, who were supposed to implement peace and make sure that it remained, it was Obama. So 2014 in February, Crimea was invaded. 2015, things really kept going. And Obama did not have what he needed to have, strength, power, authority, to ensure that Russia would actually follow with the agreements that they made. Then Trump gets into office and we don't have any war. Why is that? Is it because we had a pandemic, because we were unlucky? No, it has nothing to do with that. It was because he understands, the way that he's described it, the art of the deal. If you don't know what that means, that's fine. But I'm going to tell you, if you really want to have some interesting insight into the way that you can get your enemy to do things that you need them to do, I suggest you go and read Army Field Manual 2-22.3, Chapter 8. This is a field manual that military intelligence interrogators use so that they can gain compliance from the people that they are interviewing or interrogating. It is not through physical violence. It is not through torture. Those don't work. The military intelligence community understands and knows this. It is much easier to pretend to be the right hand of the devil than to be in his path. Because if you're in his path, you're never going to get anything done but have a lot of people get killed. And Trump understands that. He doesn't want Ukraine to win. He doesn't want Russia to win. He doesn't want anybody to win. He just wants the fighting to stop. And he's been extremely consistent with that. If you disagree with that, that's fine. But it's important that you understand why the countries are arguing amongst themselves. Okay? So Russia has always been a bully. Absolutely, 100%, they're a bully. But there's a reason why, they basically, they blame the West. They say the West is responsible for all these issues, all these wars, all these, things that prevent peace from existing in the region. But Russia has always been the bully. That's why when they were part of the Soviet Union was basically took up like a sixth of the entire world. Okay? With that being said, because of their expansion, and it hasn't even been 100 years, okay? The wall came down, the Iron Curtain came down in 89, 90. It depends on who you're talking to and what event you're actually determining brought down basically this Cold War that was going on, okay? Just because some critical event happened doesn't mean that everything stopped immediately. Now, I want you to understand that I'm 38 years old, and this reign that Russia had is not even 40 years old from when the Cold War ended. From when maps all over the world had to be modified because of so many boundary and border changes with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Okay? Now, with that being said, you have Russians who don't even know where their borders officially end on their west borders, on their southern west borders. And the reason for that is because they have people living in other countries like Ukraine who do not speak Ukrainian. They only speak Russian. So are they Russian? Well, it depends on who you talk to. Now, if you're trying to compare the way that the country of Ukraine follows policy, follows government opinion, if you try to compare anything that they do to the way that we do things here in the United States, you're only going to end up becoming more and more confused and being more and more wrong about the situation. And the reason I say this is because they have a different type of identity. You have to remember that even before Russia invaded several years ago, when Biden was in office, before they invaded, after Crimea, they had sections of their country who were in division with Ukraine. They denied that they were Ukrainian. They said, no, that is not who we are. And basically, it's almost like you have small militias, military. If you were to go, let's say, to California, and suddenly they had a militia and a military that said, no, we're not part of the United States anymore. Well, we don't have that happening here because we nip it in the bud as soon as possible. Ukraine wasn't able to do that, though. And the reason for that is because Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in the world. You cannot deny that. Not at all. You can go and look it up. There's actually a rating. I'm going to look it up right now. Nation corruption ratings. And it's called the Corruptions Perceptions Index. And there will be a score. And you kind of want to be, as a country, not at the top, not at the bottom. Ideally, you'd want to be the least corrupt, right? And so when you're looking at this index, it's actually really, really crazy when you take a look and see how it works. So the number closer to 0 means you're actually more corrupt. The number closer to 100 means you're less corrupt. And they give two scores. They give a score, and then they give a rank. The rank is largely irrelevant, and the website that you go to, which is transparency.org, should have a spot on there that tells you to ignore the rank, because the rank really only matters based on how many countries were involved and who got rated for the year. So if you go on there right now and you're looking at the index for 2024 and you just type in United States, we are rated at 65. So we're not, fully corrupt, but we definitely have some room for improvement. But then you type in Russia and they have a score of 22. And then you type in Ukraine and they have a score of 35. And that was in 2024. Now, if you were to go back before Zelenskyy, let's go back to like 2017 and we'll see if they've changed. So they're rated at 30 in 2017. So they were actually worse in 2017. If you go to 2018 and you type in Ukraine, you're going to get 32. So some of their ratings or their scores have improved, but they are still in the bottom 3% of all nations in the entire world with respect to corruption, or at least perception of corruption. So, with that being said, you can't take everything that Ukraine says to heart and think that it's all honest and true, especially when you have an actor who is the president. A lot of people don't realize that. Zelenskyy was an actor. Okay? He is good at playing roles. He's good at pretending to be things that he's not. And so if you think that he ran on a platform of getting rid of corruption, you're wrong. I mean, he did run that. However, the Pandora Papers revealed that he has offshore holdings, and they were largely holdings that were deemed to be corrupt. Okay? And you can go even further into those to see that even though he tried to make it look like he wasn't corrupt by giving away some of those holdings, properties, monies, bank accounts, whatever, he still has a friend who manages them and still basically is in control of those accounts for Zelenskyy. So Zelenskyy is actually relatively corrupt. Okay? There's also corruption that has been uncovered from their defense minister, even as recently as last year in January. There was an audit that covered corruption connected to military procurement worth 10 billion, I don't know how you say their currency, hryvnia, which is about 262 million US. So they have a corrupt country. They had many, many corrupt leaders. And when you have the blind leading the blind, it's really hard to end that corruption. How does Zelenskyy know what non-corruption looks like if he's never seen it in his lifetime? Okay? It's impossible. Now, going back to the Trump and Ukraine conversation. So Trump was trying to say, hey, I am not going to, of course I'm going to flatter Putin. I'm not in bed with him, but if I'm not nice to him, I won't get any peace negotiations. Just like Putin will be very upset if I'm only nice to you, President Zelenskyy, because then he'll think, oh, well, you think I'm your, 100% your enemy and you want me to fail. Trump understands the art of the deal. He does not want anyone to win or to lose. He just wants it all to be over. And I do think that he's right in the sense that Russia is a superpower. Not only are they a superpower, but they have plenty of atomic nuclear warheads that can cause severe damage. I think they actually outnumber the United States. I could be wrong, but if they don't, then they're at least number 2. And Trump does not want war. He definitely doesn't want nuclear war. And Trump is right when he says, yes, those other deals that you had failed because they were with Obama. They were with Biden. But I had peace. Russia did not do these things. Russia was afraid of us, the United States of America. And he didn't feel like he could be making these crazy invasions and things like that under Donald Trump's rule. Zelenskyy wasn't understanding that. J.D. Vance was trying to get some gratitude to be shown. And I can understand why, J.D. Vance has a bitter taste in his mouth from Zelenskyy, because Zelenskyy basically, just before Trump was elected, came and visited, I think it was a weapons manufacturing facility, and only Democrats were invited. No Republicans were invited for that walk. So basically, he was a walking endorsement for the Kamala Harris or Biden campaign. Kind of depends on how you want to look at it and the timing of everything. But and you have this president of Ukraine coming and trying to make demands and trying to say, no, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to negotiate peace. I'm not going to let the United States be the one who negotiates peace for Ukraine, when he's not in a position of power where he can make those demands. Basically, Trump is trying to say, look, you had your chance. You had your opportunity. Before the war began, you could have negotiated peace. During the war, you could have negotiated peace. And now that I'm in office, I'm tired of you failing, and I'm going to negotiate peace. Zelenskyy doesn't like that. Now, people have called Zelenskyy a dictator. I don't know that I'd quite go 100% that direction yet. However, it's important to understand they were supposed to have presidential elections last year. Due to martial law being declared, they have not been able to. And Zelenskyy's argument is, well, if it's not safe enough during war for elections to be held, then we shouldn't have elections. Sounds like a dictator to me. Sounds like someone who wants to stay in power. Most of his country is not under attack. Sure, there's definitely going to be cities and towns that are, but how does that change anything? You think that the people there can still eat food, they can still walk the streets, they can still dress themselves, but they can't vote? And you could change things to make it so it's easier for them to vote. You could give a longer timeline for votes to be cast. You could provide better protection and defense at polling stations. He simply doesn't want to. And I get it. He had a junky presidency. Okay, he wanted to run on the idea that he was going to end corruption in Ukraine, and instead a war started, and so he didn't really get to meet any of his presidential promises the way that he had envisioned. Now, it is also important to understand that Russia isn't always wrong. We just don't always get to know the truth because the media throughout the entire world will skew everything. I don't know that he was correct in invading Ukraine. He probably wasn't. However, it didn't just come out of thin air. Some type of straw broke the camel's back that we don't get to know about. And that's another talking point that I want to bring up. And the current, oh my gosh, what's the U.S. press secretary's name? Caroline Leavitt. She has been pretty good when asked questions about deals, negotiations, etc. She's been pretty good about saying, if I discuss those, they could derail those negotiations. Basically, what she's saying is there is secret information or confidential information that could impact the safety and security of the United States. And so we cannot share that. You don't get to know everything just because you're the press. You don't get to understand everything just because you're the press. We don't always get to know why the president does what he does. But I can guarantee you, having come from a background where I've had a security clearance, that I can tell you there are things that are done for certain reasons that you don't get to know about. And they might not always make sense to you, but they make sense to the people doing it, and they have enough buy-in to make those decisions. Sometimes it's done for psychological reasoning, so not necessarily warfare. In the military community, you might call it psychological warfare. But sometimes you're trying to sway a conversation a specific way by starting a fire somewhere else, or making the American people or our European allies think that we're doing one thing, but you see the left hand doing one thing and the right hand's doing another, you're like a magician. Everyone's focused over here while this right hand is doing what actually needs to be done. And so I think what's important to understand that with this disagreement, I don't think Trump was wrong. To be honest, Zelensky's country has deals to pay back Europe for the money and equipment that they've donated. He didn't have deals to pay us back. They need to sign over their mineral rights or come to an agreement on how to repay us. And they need to start showing some gratitude because they're not in a position to negotiate. They do not have the strength. They do not have the power. They weren't able to do it previously, and they're not going to be able to do it going forward without the help of the United States. And I absolutely think that. Putin knows it. Trump gets it. Zelenskyy, during this White House Oval Office, fiasco, if you watch him, he was like a toddler. He was unprofessional in the way he spoke, unprofessional in the way he dressed, and he was constantly crossing his arms, whereas Trump stayed very open, very relaxed. The only time Trump even seemed to, I wouldn't say get angry, he got louder so that he could be heard, so he could talk over Zelenskyy. And I don't think that he's wrong. Zelenskyy was a guest in our nation's house. You don't talk over the host. Even if there's something you want to say, you wait patiently, you uncross your arms, you dress like a gentleman, and you show up on time. And those are things that Zelenskyy threw in our nation's face. And you should be appalled if you think that countries can treat us like that and not have it go the way that it did today. I think it was handled extremely well. I think that if we could have the press involved in a lot of these meetings with nations' leaders, you would understand just how poorly run countries are without the help of the United States. You would understand that these countries are big babies. They think they know it all, and they don't. There is a reason we are the greatest nation in the world. And I know people are going to listen to this and say, you're not the greatest nation. Yes, we are. Cash me outside. How about that? Every other nation pales in comparison to the United States. Now, are there things other countries are good at that they're better than the United States at? Sure. But then you also have to bear in mind that those countries are the size of a peanut. You can't compare the economy of Denmark to the economy of the United States, or the education of Denmark to the education of the United States, because one state has more people than their entire country does. So we have such a vast degree of territories, of land, of policies, ideas, and cultures. We are literally the melting pot when it comes to, I shouldn't say literally, we are figuratively the melting pot of the world when it comes to different cultures, different languages. I know you're all going to say, no, you aren't. You don't speak very many languages. We have over 300 languages spoken here. And those are the ones that are native to since we've been a country. It doesn't mean they're native to the land. It means they have been here since this country was formed. So, with that being said, understand that there will probably be more talks. Zelenskyy will humble himself. He already has. He posted on Twitter, thanks for hosting me. And he realizes he's in a bad place. And what's going to happen is he's going to return to his country, and his citizens are going to say, what the hell? Why would you go and do that? We were about to negotiate a way to have the protection of the United States in exchange for some minerals. And we were getting close to negotiating peace with Russia, and now you just threw it all in the garbage. So make sure that as you're watching the news, what I wish you could know today is that there are two sides to every coin. And when the coin has anything to do with the media, it's going to be a very noisy coin when it falls. And it's not always going to be truth. You're not always going to know what's accurate and what's not accurate. I'll tell you what, there's one thing that I absolutely love. It's access to raw footage. I love when I can see TikTok videos or YouTube videos of what's happening out there. Sure, some people can edit that stuff and skew it the way they want, but a lot of people are just hitting the quick upload button on TikTok, and you're getting to see what's actually happening over there. And then you can use that information to form your opinions rather than something that's been severely cut, severely edited, severely monitored, and then, just buying into the liberal bias or the conservative bias that's out there. You can't agree to all of it. You have to find middle ground, and you have to understand that if there's smoke, there's probably fire. So where did the smoke come from? Who created it? If Putin felt that there was smoke from Ukraine, where did it come from? Did it stem from the Soviet Union, times of the Soviet Union? Did it stem from something that Ukraine did? There's factions in Ukraine that have separated. They don't want to be part of Ukraine. You can't deny that they exist because they do. They've been killing people in Ukraine for decades. Ukraine has always had some type of little war going. It's not like the United States, where we have gang violence and we have ourselves killing ourselves. But we don't have people who are saying, oh, I'm not part of the United States. I'm not an American citizen. And then they're, taking up arms and going to war. If we do, it's something like Waco and it ends pretty quick. It doesn't drag on for years. So I wish people could know that the world is not as bad as you think it is. The government is not as evil as you think it is. But at the same time, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. And so hopefully you enjoyed this today. I know it might have been a little bit scatterbrained, but hopefully you can relate. Hopefully you enjoy it, and we will see you next time.